A bit lit, celebrating research and creativity of all kinds.
Perry, hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm very well, Andy. It's lovely to speak to you again. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good too, and it's lovely to speak to you. So we're making this film celebrating Edward's boys, looking very generously. You're sharing the rehearsal process as you work on John Marston's The Fawn. We've got to talk to some of the boys from the cast as well. And today, excitingly, we get to talk to Edward's boys' director, artistic director, and leader. So hello, we're pleased about that. I guess the first obvious question is what it's been like to work under lockdown. I think lockdown's made many of us feel very differently about what we do. How has it been? How have you felt about it?
It's been extremely interesting for me personally because I've learned something new. I've learned something about myself. If we get to talk about the Fawn, Marston's The Fawn later, self-knowledge is I think central to the play. So we were when first lockdown occurred, as some people will know, we were a week away from opening a show, Ben Jonson's The Silent Woman, which of course we had to cancel. And at that point we had to cancel it because some of the students were coming to the end of their school careers and they've now gone on to university. We weren't able to postpone it. And at that point, it was so painful for those of us involved. There was a sort of tacit understanding, and indeed I made it explicit at one point, that we're never going to suffer this again. We're never going to start a show unless we know there's a good chance of being able to put it on, because it was painful. And actually thereafter, that was the March. Thereafter, there were several things we had in our calendar that had to be cancelled. Really quite nice, exciting performances and events that we were going to do. Hopefully we can dig them up again at some point, but they had to be cancelled as well. One of the things we were going to do was to perform for the Museum of St. John's Ambulance down in Clerkenwell. And we've got a bit of a relationship with the people there. And in the museum, they actually have the hall that the Master of the Revels used to sit in. And that's the hall where, I don't know if you've ever heard of John Lilly, but where some of John Lilly's plays were given sort of what we might call dress rehearsals in front of the Master of the Revels and other plays, of course. So we were going to perform last September in their hall as part of a fundraiser for St. John Ambulance, and it was a win-win. That had to be cancelled, of course. And then St. John got in touch and said, we're going to do an online fundraising event. Would Edward's boys agree to make a contribution in some way? Could you record something and film it and send it along? So the short answer was yes, of course we will. And I went back to a play that we'd done before, Wit and Science, and I chose a 10-minute section, which I thought might be funny and entertaining, and re-rehearsed it with the same actors. And this was when schools were open again in the late September, early October last year. And it had to be socially distanced, and it was all under all sorts of rather difficult circumstances. But rehearsing for 2 weeks and making a little film, I'd never been a film director before, making a little film was just great. And the two lads loved it, and I found I loved it. And we suddenly thought, because what's happened in schools anyway, when they're open, is that there's no point in having long lunchtimes or long breaks because people are just standing around with nothing to do. So our breaks are shortened, our lunchtimes are shortened, people leave earlier. Basically, you come in and either as a teacher or a student, you do lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson, and then you go. And there's no real extracurricular. You can't do physical sport and running around. You can't, so you can't sing, you can't have the choir. So it was work, go home. And just for those 2 or 3 weeks, with four or five rehearsals, we found that we were looking forward to the end of the day to do an hour and a half. I know it sounds really sentimental, but having done that the kind of the real value of that sort of creative endeavor. And if people go to the Edwards Boys website, you can actually see that little 10-minute film. It's fine. It's great. It's fun. But what it did was give us the confidence. So I got the company together, those boys who are still in the school, and said, okay, this was October time. Shall we risk it? Shall we? And they all said, yeah, yeah, let's give it a go. So I had been approached by two people you know very well, Claire McManus at Roehampton and Lucy Munro at King's, who've got this Engendering the Stage project. They'd approached me some time ago with a wish list saying, any chance you might do one of these plays? And one of those plays was Marston's The Fawn. And although I knew the play, I didn't know it particularly well. And I reread it and thought, this play is just so good. Why don't people do this play? Which occasionally happens with us. I think this is a masterpiece. So decided we've got to have a go. So we started rehearsal in late November, and we were socially distanced, which isn't a problem for us because, as you know very well, Andy, we begin with all this table work. So it's just like being in a big classroom, and I've usually got 2 or 3 other students with me, and they're sitting distanced. We couldn't really mix up year groups, but that was okay when you've got them that far apart reading round. So that went pretty well until, of course, January, when we went into the second lockdown and they were sent away. And then it started, I had to get used to Zoom rehearsals. And actually, for those bits of table work, it wasn't too bad. Of course, one of the things is the slight delay. I notice you're not saying very much, and I'm sure you would love to, but I keep talking. But that slight delay, and when you're trying to get cues and trying to get pace and rhythm and so on, but it didn't matter so much at that stage when we were just sort of unpicking the text and seeing what we could find. So we got to that stage. We were hoping to present the play in March, but once we'd gone into the second lockdown, it was quite clear. But everybody felt that this time we had a chance to think it through, so we could postpone. So we're going to do the show in late September and early October. We know we can't tour this time. Whatever the restrictions are, touring at that stage, I think is just going to be a step too far. So we'll just perform in Stratford-on-Avon in school and do 4 shows, and hopefully we can get some sort of live audience, because the play really needs, all plays do, but this one demands a live audience. So sorry, rather long answer, but that's what we've been doing. And I've learned that I won't say I need to rehearse. I think that's a bit too much, but rehearsing has really given me a great diversion, a great sense of creativity, and for the kids. And there was a lovely moment back in December when we actually went into our big hall and we laid out the set on the floor, but twice as big as it will be, so that everyone could be socially distanced, to try a bit of blocking. And I heard one of the more experienced lads, Jamie, say to Johan, another experienced lad, as they were putting out chairs and things, "It's good to be back." And there was that sense of, yeah, we're back, we're doing what we do. So yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Fantastic, thank you. That's really, really fascinating. Thinking back to The Silent Woman, you mentioned that I'm being silent because of Zoom, but thinking back to The Silent Woman, for anyone interested in more content from that particular production, we were really lucky on A Bit Lit that you generously offered to talk about that production. There's a film with you soon after that production had to be put to bed, but there's also a documentary, an audio documentary of the production hosted by Harry McCarthy, talking to members of Edwards Boys. And we also were lucky to get a former Edwards boy, an Edwards man, I don't know how you would put it, George Ellingham, who spoke to us.
Oh, not George, no.
George Ellingham's speaking to us, not just about working in Edwards Boys, but how he then took that forward into staging plays as a university student. So there's quite a lot already on A Bit Lit of Edwards Boys content, which is glorious. And I wonder if we might invite you back as well in the future. You talked about the Fawn not touring, but if it ever wants to tour to A Bit Lit, we'd be absolutely delighted to host parts of the production further down the line, as well as the rehearsals we're sharing in this film.
You're very generous, and if we're not outstaying our welcome, we'll always like to do stuff for you. Thanks.
Fantastic, thank you. Perry, it feels like, and do correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it feels like there's been a shift in recent years for Edward's Boys, speaking much more directly to individual research projects, and particularly to research projects which are built around particular writers. So you mentioned Engendering the Stage, and you and I have also collaborated with the research project Before Shakespeare, and both of those two projects are not about individual authors. But you've also been working with the Thomas Nash project and with the John Marston project. I wonder, firstly, if you tell us a bit about what it's like just to work with, for whatever the right word is, research projects, and also if there is a difference working with a project which is thinking about a particular writer and a project which is coming at the period in terms of, well, in Before Shakespeare's case, in terms of kind of time period, and in terms of Engendering the Stage, something to do with gender in performance. Yeah, so the first question is what it's like to work with research, a research project.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Andy. That's two really interesting questions. And the first one, it's a great privilege to work with experts on these texts, because we are patently not. I'm not an academic, and the lads are not proper actors, so we're finding our way, and to have some prompt and guidance and sounding board and so on from the academic world is terrific. I mean, in a sense, as you're aware, I know, right from the beginning there was an academic focus to the project, so doing stuff with Warwick University and Carol Rutter and so on, but then there several times people like Leah Scragg with Lily have come along and made suggestions and said, I'm thinking of doing this. I suppose one of the reasons is, of course, that we're the only company like this, the only all-boy company, with some sort of heritage or history or continuous kind of thing going on, and so we come to mind. But it's great and stimulating and exciting to work alongside experts, or for them, if we want to put it like that. I've never felt hampered in any way by any of these people, including, of course, yourself. They've never said, look, we want you to do this particular play and we want you to do it in this way because we want to discover this or whatever. That's never happened. And, I wouldn't want to work under those conditions. It's always a discovery. Let's see what this play hasn't been done for hundreds of years, or this author is completely misrepresented according to us. Let's try and put it on its feet and see what happens. So that's been great. I suppose, to be hard-nosed for a minute, I mean, we are a state school, and in terms of funding the shows, it's bums on seats, it's ticket sales, always. And I get a little bit of support from the Parents Association to do with the arts, if I ask for it, and for touring and so on. But fundamentally, it's selling tickets. Now, if a project like the Marston or Nash project come to us, then generally they'll have a small sum, but a little sum of money, and say, look, we can help hiring out this particular space. So with the Thomas Nash project, they had already sorted out the school down in Croydon, Archbishop Whitgift's Palace. So that wasn't down to us to pay for. Or the project might say, look, we can provide some financial support with the coach travel. And those very basic but really important things, because we don't have a bottomless pot to dip into. So that's been very useful. But I would say, unlike most of the theatrical profession, we're not prostitutes. We don't chase the money. It's really helpful if there's there, but also sometimes I just do a play because I want to do a play. I want to do that particular play, and so on. But it never really ends there, because if you want to do a play that hasn't been done for a long time, like I don't know, I did a Trick to Catch the Old One a few years ago, a Middleton play. I'm very fond of Middleton, and there was no reason apart from wanting to do it. But then the person who'd edited it for the Revels edition, Paul Mulholland, got in touch from the States and said, well, you know, I'm really interested. I'd love to come. I can't come, but if you want to ask any questions. And Paul sent across his digital text. So that was really helpful. A nice, modern, fresh text. Richard Dutton, eminent scholar. Richard has been so helpful. I met him through the Marston project. But one of the things he always says is, you know, I'll always help because it's such fun. And this is great for us. So that I suppose there's always, but you're quite right. There has been this tendency in recent years, probably since the Nash, and then you, and then the Marston project, and it looks like we're going to work on another famous writer from the period in the near future. I think that's right. Remind me of your second question, Andy. Sorry.
Really whether there's a difference working with projects which are thinking about a particular writer and therefore might be using your productions to think about that writer, as opposed to engendering the stage or before Shakespeare, which are thinking about a kind of thematic issue. I mean, you've already, in a way, you've answered the question because you've said that the research projects don't tend to lead the kinds of things that you might do in the. I was just interested. I mean, in a way, part of my question is about whether there's ever pressure to love the play and the playwright. And in some ways, I'm aware that, you know, you talked a minute ago about experts, but actually I think your company reveals the limits of that expertise, because I remember when you did Thomas Nash's Summer's Last Will and Testament, some of the experts on that project were kind of warning you, this is not a very good play, it's not very stage worthy. And your expertise and the expertise of your boys showed that was wrong, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Maybe I've been lucky, or maybe I've got very sensitive antennae and managed to keep away from those who want to take it over, you know. But it would be perverse, wouldn't it? To speak about it in sort of innocent terms, wouldn't it be perverse? I want to find out more about how this play works. So let me tell the theatre company how to do it. You know. But all the time, my experience has been that the scholars have been so immensely generous. As I say, very occasionally with some money, and that's great, but much more with their time and their enthusiasm and support. You know, it's not uncommon for them to agree to have phone call after phone call from me after rehearsals, where I'm asking questions about sort of textual problems or what we might do, and as I say, sounding board, bouncing ideas off. So I've found it really stimulating, and that's the other thing. You know, the kids love it. They love it when they're performing in front of, you know, the world living experts on Nash or whatever it is, and then they're asked questions. That's great. But they also really enjoy meeting these people in the course of rehearsals and after performances and chatting it through. I mean, you're one of those people. You know, it's really stimulating and inspiring for those students. Many of whom, in fact, I would say probably all of whom, will want to go on to university. You know, so that's another great thing. They can see what the world of university is like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really great. And you talked about, you know, you very modestly said maybe you get pulled into these projects because you're the only kids on the block, as it were, the only boys on the block. But actually, I mean, firstly, I want to underline the sheer quality of the work that all of you do as being very important to the reason you get asked to do this sort of thing, but also the ethos and the attitude of the company. It's so easy, and we see it from other theatre companies. It's so easy to get hyper reverential about text and about history, and often to return to fairly boring, unhelpful, and indeed inaccurate 19th century ideas of how Shakespeare and his contemporaries worked. And you know, Edward's boys don't do any of those things. They're interested in how the text might work now, and are interested in these texts as theatrical prompts. And I think that's another reason why scholars find this so exciting, is that this is not an historical inquiry; it's a live contemporary inquiry.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And you know, I think that's probably how it was. I'm no expert and I don't care, but trying to put on a good show, which is what I always say, and then you've said to me in the past, well, isn't that what would have happened back in the day? And of course it is, but also this reverential. You see, I am a textual dinosaur. I know I am, and the kids will tell you it's going over and over and playing around with the words, and you've got to say the right words in the right order. And yes, but that's a question mark or a punctuation mark or whatever it is. I do all of that, but I do it so that then they know and can command it and then can be free. And I have a stupid little thing that I say to them, do what I say, do what you want. Do what I say. So this is how it is. This is what right now you got hold of that, do something with it. Now go where you want. And I very much feel that with these plays, that you've got to get the text under your fingernails, but then you've got to think, how can I make this live? How can I make it zing? And that might mean that you do some cutting, or you change some things, or you do some things in some surprising ways. But I would say there's some sort of textual justification for that because of what we think the core of the play is doing. I know that sounds rather pompous, and who am I to say how there's, but then again, I'd say, who is anybody? These texts are available for performance, and if we don't do a very good production of X, doesn't matter. Nobody's done it for 400 years, and they might not do it again. So I think it's that creative bouncing off the text that is so exciting. And let's be frank, the kids are really good at doing that. They want to be a bit irreverent as well, in a way that whisper it, but you sometimes can't be with Shakespeare.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Perry, looking at the time, we should move ahead to thinking about the Fawn itself, I think. And in particular, what it's been like to turn to this play. I mean, I'm presuming every new play you do feels like an entirely new kind of snapshot of both early modern theatre and also how Edward's Boys might work in the theatre now. How has it been working with John Marston's The Fawn?
It's been really interesting, because the last major production we did was 2019, and it was John Marston's The Malcontent. Huh. Now, I would say it's a coincidence, because we should have done Johnson's Silent Woman, and we have done Radford's Wit and Silence. There are all sorts of other things. But now these two plays were written consecutively. So Malcontent came first, Fawn was the next one. They're both disguised Duke plays. So like Measure for Measure, the Duke goes into disguise in order to explore either his or somebody else's court. And in this play, it's somebody else's court. So that's been interesting, because it's like, well, you're just doing the same play, aren't you? Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, no. This is such a fascinating play. I really hope that we perform it in front of an audience for so many reasons, but one of those is I'd love to know what the audience response is, because we kind of feel that what we've read about it, and there was one production back in 1982, National Theatre, which was highly successful, and I've spoken to a number of academics who are now extremely eminent academics who saw it back in the 80s, who tell me how really funny it was, and I think it is a really funny play, but there are some weird things about it, and the way we work is always asking a simple question, which is why? Why is that character saying or doing that at that point? Why? No, not making assumptions, but why? And there's some very strange things that happen in this play, and I'm fascinated to see. I think it's extremely funny. As I say, I do think it's funny, but I think it's a very cruel play. Now, this is something that I've got to be very careful here, because my responsibility within school is pastoral care. And, I'd like to think that we don't have a lot of bullying in King Edward VI School. And when we find bullying, as there is in any institution, we attempt to deal with it. You see, I think Marston really got boys, because that's why he did this play with a group of boys, because it's about bullying, and it's a particular form of male bullying. And there's so many examples of it going on. And I don't know, bullying isn't very funny. Bullying is really rather cruel. And it's been very interesting in rehearsal. We don't sit around endlessly sort of having therapy and talking about our own worst experiences and so on. But it is something that the kids understand. The group against the individual, and the power of humiliation, and the effect of trying to make somebody feel that you're their best friend when in fact you're laughing behind their back. And there's so much that's going on in this play that the boys can tap into, and then show us how it's done. So it's been fascinating, and we're putting a lot of music into this. I will say that this is the closest I think I'll ever get to directing a musical. So that may or may not attract people. It's a fascinating play, and whilst it would seem to be very similar to the malcontent, our experience, and many of the boys were involved in the malcontent, our experience is that it's a markedly different kind of play.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I guess it's a play, as you say, about bullying, but is it also a play about the exposure of bullying? And you talked also about it being a play about self-knowledge, but it's also sort of a play about surveillance, isn't it? And knowledge through surveying other people. And so there's that sense of the act of bullying being exposed to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we have this main character, Hercules, who is the Fawn, who spends most of the play in disguise. He has a huge number of soliloquies. So he's in that position where he's complicit with the audience. He's sort of halfway between the audience and the action in many ways. He's sharing his thoughts, but he's not a trustworthy narrator. He really isn't. And when we're talking about self-knowledge, he's exposing people's lack of self-knowledge. He's exposing their hypocrisy and their greed and their sexual licentiousness and on and on and on. But he very rarely stops to question his own. In fact, I would say he doesn't. So I think that's a remarkably interesting thing. And let's be frank, most people, in terms of disguised Duke plays, most people will know Measure for Measure. And I'm thinking the role that's played by the Duke in that play has always been, for me, highly questionable, the way he manipulates characters. So that's why I said earlier on, I really hope we get to perform this. This play needs an audience, because the audience are dragged in, or should be dragged into this world. And then how do they feel about this? And they're being made to laugh at these things. Well, hold on, and this person who's supposed to be their friend is really not being very pleasant. There's an awful lot about the way in which the Fawn stands and watches the action with the audience behind him, and he's saying, yeah, it's like this, isn't it? It's like this, isn't it? Don't you think? I think it places the audience in a really awkward position. I'm probably not selling it very well, but I think it's terribly exciting. And in terms, Marston was a great theatre man, absolutely understood the power of those awkward moments when you're in the theatre thinking, hold on, I don't like what I'm seeing here. I don't want to go along with this. And he does it to the nth degree.
And yet you're being called in to almost approve of it or to take side.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and there I would come back to bullying again. The number, maybe we're not all bullies, but how often do we call it out? How often do we just stand on the edge and sort of condone it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I guess my final question then, Perry, I mean, you were talking there about not selling it to the audience. And my final question was going to be why the Fawn and why now? How would you sell it to the audience other than telling them that they might get co-opted into being terrible bullies?
Yeah, to be frank, I'd say, look, come and see this play, that not only is very rarely done, so it's done 1605 probably, and then it's 1982 where it had a short run at the National, and there's never been done elsewhere. Okay, so it's very rarely done. Come and see this play that is, I think, incredibly funny, hugely funny, in a whole range of different theatrical modes and styles and things. And then try and work out why people don't do this more often, because there's such riches. You know, it's I think it's very entertaining, but such a wise play. I mean, I will go back also to say one of the things that's fascinating about it, which is why Claire and Lucy have asked us to look at this play, is the role of women. And, you know, the men on the whole are the bullies, and the women are the more mature, more balanced, more sensible, more wise characters. And one of the things that we're really enjoying is the central scene. And I mean that in both senses. It comes in the middle of Act 3, but it is absolutely pivotal scene, which is entirely between two female characters, the beautiful young princess or daughter of the Duke, the sort of Juliet figure, and her confidant, Philokalia. And this is 4 pages long, where they are talking about love and about the young woman's hopes for getting married, and they're talking about life and the way people behave. I mean, it's such an incredibly interesting, but also very light and funny scene. And I think that is amazing. You know, you don't often get that in these plays, particularly in these boys' company plays, where you get a central scene between two female characters who really sort things out. So you know, I'd say come and see it for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's completely fascinating. Thank you. Perry, it's been a real joy to talk to you as always. I'm really excited to hear some of the rehearsal process as part of the film. And good luck with the production.
Thank you, Andy. And I really hope that you're able to come and see it when we get to do it.
Oh, me too. Cheers.